Welcome back. Today we are conducting a forensic analysis of a phenomenon that strangles the progress of nearly 60% of all language learners. We are looking at the B2 plateau. This is that frustrating purgatory where you are good enough to survive, but not good enough to thrive. You can order a meal, you can sit in a meeting, but you cannot command a room. We are going to dismantle the neurology, the linguistics, and the psychology behind why your brain actively stops you from reaching fluency.
The B2 plateau is not just a lack of study hours, it is a biological efficiency mechanism. When you start learning a language, you are in a survival state. Your brain is dumping dopamine every time you successfully communicate a need. You say water, someone gives you water. That is a high-stakes, high-reward loop. But once you reach B2, which the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages defines as independent, that survival pressure vanishes. You are functionally fluent. Because the emergency of non-understanding is over, your brain's neuroplasticity mechanisms for language acquisition effectively downshift. You stop learning because you no longer need to learn to survive.
This distinction between functional fluency and linguistic precision is critical. Most learners view language as a tool for transaction. I give you words, you give me results. But the jump from B2 to C1 requires shifting the goal from transaction to interaction and status. We have to look at the concept of fossilization, a term coined by linguist Larry Selinker in the early 1970s. This is the idea that errors become a permanent, calcified part of your interlanguage.
Fossilization is the silent killer of advanced fluency. Imagine a pianist who learns a sonata but consistently plays one wrong note in the second measure. If they practice that piece 500 times with the error, that wrong note becomes encoded in the basal ganglia as the correct motor pattern. At the B2 level, learners are often 80% correct. The listener understands them, so the listener rarely corrects them. Consequently, errors in prepositions, article usage, or syntax become muscle memory. Your brain ignores the 20% of the signal that is noise because the 80% signal is sufficient for communication. To break this, you cannot just speak more. Speaking more with fossilized errors only reinforces the bad habits.
You have to actively defossilize. This requires a shift from communicative competence to what we might call forensic analysis of one's own speech. The noticing hypothesis, proposed by Richard Schmidt, suggests that you cannot learn a specific feature of a language unless you consciously notice it. B2 learners stop noticing. They stop hearing the difference between in the meeting and at the meeting because the distinction rarely changes the outcome of the event. But to a C1 speaker or a native listener, that distinction signals authority and precision.
Precise language signals status. This brings us to the most significant tactical shift required for C1, the move from isolated vocabulary to collocations. A B2 speaker views language as a set of Lego bricks, single words they snap together. They might say, I have a big problem. It is grammatically correct. It conveys meaning, but it is low resolution. A C1 speaker does not use single words. They use lexical chunks. They would say, I am facing a monumental challenge. The adjective monumental does not just mean big. It carries a weight in specific gravity that big lacks.
The difference there is not just vocabulary size. It is knowing which words live together. This is the lexical approach, championed by Michael Lewis. Language consists of grammaticalized lexis, not lexicalized grammar. If we look at high-frequency C1 collocations, we see patterns that non-natives rarely use naturally. Take the intensifiers. A B2 learner says very. I am very tired. It is very cold. A C1 learner knows that specific adverbs belong to specific adjectives. You are utterly exhausted. You are bitterly disappointed. The weather is bitterly cold, not strongly cold.
Exactly. You cannot be bitterly hot. That collocation does not exist in the native corpus. If you use the wrong collocate, you do not sound wrong in a grammatical sense, but you sound off. You trigger a micro-hesitation in your listener's brain. Reaching C1 is about reducing the cognitive load on your listener. When you use standard collocations like deeply regret or highly unlikely, the native listener's brain predicts the second word before you finish the first. You sound fluent because you are predictable in a native-like way. If you say, I strongly regret, the listener has to process that unusual combination, which breaks the flow.
Let's pivot to the architecture of thought, syntax. At B2, grammar is usually viewed as a set of rules to avoid punishment. Don't drop the S, don't use the wrong tense. But at C1, grammar becomes a tool for emphasis and rhetoric. We need to discuss information structure. In English, we typically follow a subject-verb-object pattern, but advanced speakers manipulate this to control the focus. Consider inversion for emphasis. A B2 speaker says, "I have never seen such incompetence."
Whereas the C1 speaker shifts the negative adverb to the front. Never have I seen such incompetence. By fronting the negative, never, and inverting the auxiliary, have, and the subject, I, you turn a simple observation into a dramatic declaration. It sounds authoritative. It sounds final. This is not just fancy speaking. It is about controlling the narrative rhythm. Another tool is the cleft sentence. Instead of saying, "I want a refund," which is direct and slightly aggressive, the C1 speaker uses a what cleft. What I am looking for is a resolution to this billing error. It softens the demand while highlighting the desired outcome.
That structures the listener's attention. You are telling them, focus on this part. This level of nuance requires a complete overhaul of how learners consume media. We need to contrast extensive listening with intensive listening. The standard advice, just listen to podcasts while you cook, is practically useless for bridging the gap from B2 to C1. That is extensive listening. It maintains your level, perhaps improves your just understanding, but it does not build precision.
Extensive listening breeds complacency. For C1, you need intensive input. This means taking a 3-minute clip of a complex audio source, a TED Talk, a BBC debate, a monologue from a film, and dissecting it. You transcribe it word for word. Then you mark the intonation patterns. Why did the pitch rise on that specific syllable? Where exactly did the speaker pause? Native speakers chunk information using pauses. If you pause in the wrong place, "I went to the store," it sounds disjointed. If you pause correctly, "I went to the store," it sounds natural. You are studying the delivery, not just the content.
This dissection leads to the psychological barrier, the identity shift. Alexander Giora proposed the concept of the language ego. He argued that your identity is wrapped up in your native language. When you speak a foreign language, you feel like a fraud or a child. At B2, you are an English learner. You accept that you are a guest in the language. To reach C1, you must view yourself as an English user. You have to adopt a persona. When I speak French, my voice drops an octave and I become more direct. I am not translating my American personality into French. I am inhabiting a French persona.
That feeling of being an imposter is actually a sign of growth. If you feel comfortable, you are translating. If you feel slightly like you are acting, you are likely using the prosody and mannerisms of the target language. This requires monolingual research. Stop translating concepts. If you are a software engineer, read your documentation only in English. If you like cooking, watch Gordon Ramsay, not a dubbed version of a chef from your country. You must link the concept of cooking directly to English words, bypassing your native language entirely. You want to build a direct neural pathway between the concept and the English output.
We cannot ignore the output side of this engine. Writing is often the neglected stepchild of language learning, yet it is the primary engine for precision. In speaking, you can wave your hands and rely on context. In writing, you are naked. Every error is visible. Writing forces you to slow down the retrieval process. You have time to choose between big, huge, and monumental. That deliberation process strengthens the neural connection to the more precise word.
The tactic here is constraint-based writing. Don't just journal about your day. That leads to repetitive, simple structures. I woke up, I ate breakfast. Instead, write a formal complaint letter to a fictional airline. Write a critique of a geopolitical article. Force yourself to use 3 inversions and 2 cleft sentences in the text. You are engineering the environment to force the brain to use the C1 pathways. For speaking, the shadowing technique is non-negotiable. You play the audio and you speak along with it, not after it, but simultaneously. You attempt to match the speaker's speed, rhythm, and emotion. You are effectively syncing your motor cortex with a native speaker's patterns.
This brings us to the timeline. We need to be realistic. The University of Cambridge and the Alliance Française generally estimate that moving from B2 to C1 takes approximately 200 to 400 guided learning hours. If you study for 1 hour a week, you will literally never get there. Your brain forgets faster than it learns at that pace. You need density. A 12-month mastery roadmap is the only way to structure this.
Structure is the antidote to the plateau.
The first 3 months must be devoted to collocation expansion. Ban the word very from your vocabulary. Force yourself to find the precise intensifier. Months 4 through 6 should focus on syntactic variety. If you find yourself using simple subject-verb-object sentences, stop. Rewrite them using a relative clause or a participle phrase. Instead of, the man stood there and he looked angry, use, standing there, the man looked furious. Months 7 through 12 are for total immersion and domain-specific mastery. This is where you remove your native language from your digital life. Your phone, your laptop, your newsfeed, all English.
It is a brute force approach, but necessary to break the fossilization. One thing we must address is the emotional toll. There is a specific type of exhaustion that comes with C1 training. It's cognitive load fatigue. When you are B2, you are comfortable. When you are pushing for C1, you are constantly monitoring your own speech for register and tone. You will feel tired. You will feel stupid. That discomfort is the feeling of your brain laying down new myelin sheets.
The B2 plateau is fundamentally a choice. It is a comfortable place to live. You can travel, you can make friends, you can watch movies. There's no shame in staying there. But if you want professional authority, if you want to be taken seriously in an international negotiation, or if you want to understand the poetry of a culture rather than just its mechanics, you have to choose the pain of precision. You have to decide that good enough is actually failure.
To synthesize our discussion, the transition from B2 to C1 is the shift from student to master. It requires defossilizing old errors through conscious analysis, upgrading from single words to collocations, utilizing grammar for rhetorical focus, and engaging in intensive forensic consumption of media. We challenge you to try the register transfer exercise. Take a paragraph from a book, rewrite it for a 5-year-old, rewrite it for a courtroom, rewrite it for a text message to a friend. You can manipulate the same information into those 3 distinct forms. You have mastered the nuance of the language.
That is the ultimate test. Fluency is not just speed. Fluency is adaptability. We hope this deep dive helps you map out your escape from the plateau. It is a long climb, but the view from the top is markedly different.
Thank you for analyzing this with us. Keep deconstructing, keep shadowing, and do not settle for survival mode. We will see you in the next session.